In this video, we'll discuss the features and benefits of bringing Microsoft Teams into your organization. This content was originally presented by Aberdean Consulting as a series of Teams live meetings in March of 2020. Microsoft Teams, like all aspects of the Microsoft 365 suite, is constantly evolving. Some features mentioned in today's video as beta or on the release roadmap may be in production by the time you watch. Whenever possible, we will try to note these discrepancies on the screen. Aberdean Consulting is a managed services provider in Madison, Wisconsin, supporting the IT needs of small and medium businesses in the Dane County area. For more information on what we do, please visit our website at aberdean.com. We hope you find this content both interesting and informative as we explore your fast track to Microsoft Teams.
All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So I'd like to welcome you to the fast track to using Microsoft Teams. I'm your host here, Kyle Harritz. You can see my information down at the bottom. TJ Horner will be doing the bulk of the presentation, and he'll be joining us shortly. And then Jim Blair will be assisting with the Q&A portion of this presentation. So thank you very much, and I will turn it over to TJ.
Thanks, Kyle. Let's start by answering the question, what is Microsoft Teams? Teams is Microsoft's unified communication and collaboration platform that combines persistent workplace chat, video meetings, file storage, and application integration. And that all sounds great. So what can we do with Teams? Using the chat and post feature, you can reduce email lag and prioritize real-time communication. With Teams meetings, you can preserve critical face-to-face interactions with your team and coordinate effectively with any of your outside partners and vendors. Lastly, using the Files feature, OneDrive and SharePoint, you can share data and collaborate in real time using the familiar Office suite you're used to. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to start with the interface, kind of walk you through how Teams looks and where things are. Then we're going to walk through customizing Teams, kind of show you how to create a team, how to add users, and how to add channels. I'm going to go through some of the chat features and different things you can do while you're communicating. We're going to go through Teams meetings, not the live meetings like we're hosting today, but just the general meetings that you'll run with your staff and collaborators. And then lastly, we're going to talk about file sharing and collaborating on data with Teams. We're going to start off the Teams interface. So on the left, you can see the main navigation menu. Here you'll see items for your activity, private chats, the teams you're in, as well as your calendar and files and apps. If you select the Teams or chat icons, an additional panel will open up showing you those items. In this example, the Teams menu was selected and shows 2 teams available to this particular demo person, and then all the channels within. If you select one of those individual channels, you'll see the contents of it displayed in the panel right next to it. And this allows you then to add new content, reply to existing content, or work with the data that's presented. Lastly, within each of those channels, there's customizable tabs. And here you'll find the individual tabs for each team and each channel within those, starting with the conversations and files. And then in this example, a wiki, access to Microsoft Planner, a PowerPoint link, and then a third-party application called Trello. So what's the goal? Well, it's to make Teams your one-stop shop to collect data and manage that data and then get it back out to people. It allows you to communicate with staff using your chat and audio calls and then video meetings to keep you informed and keep you in touch, especially in today's world that we're all still going to be living with for at least the next few months. And then lastly, allowing you to collaborate on that business data with your team seamlessly. So what things can you customize? Well, starting at the top, the most important customization is who is a member of a team. Currently, teams can contain up to 100 owners and 500 members. In this example, owners are like administrators for the team. Each team may have customized policies applied by the team owner. These policies can be any variation of those allowed by your organization up to the maximum settings allowed. And what that means is as an organization, you can choose which of these settings are forbidden or which are allowed, and then team owners can choose what level at or below that to apply to any individual team. So you give some flexibility up to the limits you're comfortable with. In addition to the default general channel, you can also add up to 200 channels in any given team, as well as 30 private channels, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. In this case, you see just an example of a number of channels in a particular team. The final step is to customize the tabs within each channel. As I mentioned, the posts and files, or in the last example, conversations, are default and required. And in the example I have here, there is an extension list, which is an Excel spreadsheet, and then a Word document called Office/Remote Schedule, which in our example, this came from our Aberdean channel, has the schedule for who is going to be staffing our office during this current crisis. So how do you structure your teams? Well, the first step is just to think about who needs access. If it's a different set of users from an existing team, that should probably be a new team. If it's the same group of users, it's most likely going to be a new channel. And if it's a subset of users, you can go either way. It can be a new channel or a new team, depending on the usage. And what that means is if the subset of users has a privilege level that is more restrictive than the team, you either want to use a private channel to lock that data in, or use a completely different team to ensure that only those you've given access to can see it. So creating a new team. In the main teams window, you'll find two different spots where you can start the process. The one that's almost always present is in the bottom left, where it says join or create a team. Once you click on that link, you'll be presented with two options. And in this case, create a team is the one we're looking to do. However, the join a team with a code option is what you can use, or what your staff can use when you've created a new team. There'll be a code that you can give them that will allow them to quickly type that in and be added to the team, or request being added. This is also the easiest way to give access to guests or external partners. You can give them the code, they can type that in, and then their team's account will try to connect to your organization and add them in. So once you click create a team, you'll be presented with two choices. You can either build a team from scratch, or you can create one from an existing group. If you already have an existing Office 365 group, you can convert it into a full team with all of the features. Most people still don't have many Office 365 groups in their organization, but if you do, this is an easy way to scale it up to be teams. Next, you'll choose the visibility. So in this case, we have private and public. The biggest difference is private teams need to be granted permission before they'll let someone in. So either administrator has to add someone by hand, or they have to request to be added, and then an administrator or team owner approves it. Public teams in your organization are open to anyone. Even if they're not already a member, they can simply find it and then ask to join, and they'll be immediately accepted. Next, you must give your team a name, which is probably pretty obvious, and then a description in the field below. The description isn't mandatory, but it's a great way to allow you to put in what the team's expectations might be, what it's supposed to be used for, or spell out any particular requirements that you might have. Maybe you put a link in there about what the who should be requesting access, or what the requirements are to gain access. You can also use hashtags in that, which are searchable, which is a neat feature that if someone wants to say search for all the customer service related teams, you can put that hashtag in there and everyone will see the 2, 3, 4 teams that you might have. That would obviously be in a much larger scale case. Wizard completes with the option to add members right away. You can go ahead and skip this. It's not presented in the graphic, but there's a button right at the bottom of this panel that says skip. You can add members anytime you want from the management interface, which we're going to show here next. So using that same gear wheel in the bottom left next to the join or create team, you can access the team's management panel. And what this will do, as you can see in this example, is show you all the teams that you currently have rights for. It's going to show you what membership level you have. So in this case, I'm an owner in all but one of those teams, and I'm a member in the Microsoft Cloud Console one. It then shows you how many people are in that team. And lastly, shows you what type. So in this case, the little globe is a public team, whereas the padlock is a private team. And finally, you'll see a set of ellipses to the right of each team that's mirrored over on the left side of the panel in the Teams window. And this brings up the context menu for that individual team. And this has all the different shortcuts that you can use to take quick action. So you can quickly add a channel, add a member, leave the team, or edit the details. And the details in this case are the description and name. You can get a link to that team. So maybe someone outside of your organization is requesting access. Well, the get link will give you that little code that you can then email them to allow them to grant access. And the last few are more administrative, where you can archive a team, which is basically packing it up and stopping any new activity, or deleting a team, which is removing it outright. Like all other Office 365 data, if you choose to delete a team, it'll be held in the system based on your retention, and then ultimately purged after anywhere from 60 to 90 days or up to 365 days. In this example, we're going to select the Manage Team item in that list. And that takes us to, in this example, managing the consulting services team. So the first tab you'll see is the Membership tab. So the highlighted button is to allow you to add a new member to the team. And right below that, you'll see all the current owners, and then followed by the members and guests. In this example, guests are anyone outside of your organization, while members are inside your organization. So you can see there's a drop-down menu where it says member, and that's where you can promote any current member of a team to an owner, or by selecting the little X there, delete them or remove them from the team. You'll notice that there isn't an X next to the owners. You have to actually demote an owner to a member prior to deleting them. They kind of make it a two-step process to ensure that no one can be removed from access without an alert being sent. So the pending request tab, we won't go into in this thing, but that would be where anyone who's requested access to a private team would show up. And there would be some buttons to allow you to either approve, deny, or just ignore the request. The channels tab is where you can come to see all the channels that are present in your team and either add new ones, delete existing ones, or change their settings. The settings tab shows you all the settings, as I mentioned previously, that you can change as part of the ownership or the administrative level of your team. So from here, team owners can customize things like the team picture. In this case, we have a Starfleet comm badge. You can change which features are allowed or disallowed. In this case, our organization allows guest access, which is in the guest permissions field. But as a team owner, I could say, I don't want guests allowed in this team and turn it off. I could never activate it if it's not allowed administratively. Another good example of that is under the fun stuff category, where it controls how you can use emojis and animated GIFs and various little fun features in chat. And those will allow you as a team owner to control how loose that restriction is. Administratively, if you've allowed everything, a team owner can still choose to restrict that down to either disallow entirely or to the most safe settings that are available. So using teams and channels, you can organize your communication with your team. Commonly, you will use teams to organize around departmental or task-related boundaries, things like accounting or HR or customer service. You can also add groups based around areas of common focus or topics. In our example, you can see a fantasy football channel where we can harass one another about the good and mostly bad choices we've made in our Office Fantasy League. And if relevant, you can also choose to customize based on physical locations within your organization, breaking things down by what building team members might be located in, what floor they might be on, what city or even state they might be located in, are handy ways to collect the information shared by staff with common interests. If you have a team of workers in Madison, their discussions might be different than ones located in Minnesota, for example. You're free to use whatever structures or combination of structures make the most sense to your organization. The goal is to organize your data in a friendly way and a way that makes you efficient. So next we're going to move on to Teams chat. So in this example, you can see a person-to-person chat between myself and Jim. And it's just a running list of chat topics. And this is private chat between he and I. In the top right, you can see a number of glyphs that are part of any chat. Starting from the left, you can start a video chat, which with one click of the button, I can ring Jim and start a video call with him directly. Next to that is the little kind of phone handset, which is the same thing except for audio only. And then thirdly is the sharing link. And with those three buttons, you can perform an instant meeting with that person. They'll have to accept it, of course, but you can immediately start working collaboratively, either face-to-face with audio or just sharing your desktop or application. And the last button there in kind of gray, it looks like two little people with the plus, and that allows you to add additional people to a chat. It is important to remember that when you add someone to a chat, it will create a whole new instance. So if you see on the left bar there, there's one for Kathy, there's one for Jim, but then right below that, there's one for Jim and Kyle. So when I clicked to add Kyle into a conversation, it created a whole new structure just for conversations between Jim and Kyle. So that did not contain any of the previous information that was only shared by Jim and I. So your privacy and the conversations you're having when it comes to the private chats are all unique and instanced. At the bottom, this is just the chat entry window, and you can see a number of glyphs that have different features on them, as well as where you can type the message and hit send. And this is an example of what a post would look like in the threaded conversation. So this is where what you would look like posting in a channel. In this instance, I posted a link to what Microsoft and Google are doing to help their customers during the current pandemic. And then I replied to my own message, creating that inline conversation. And this is a great way to organize, different chats that might be having. And as other people interact with this, they can continue to reply to that same conversation. Or if it's a different topic, they'll start a brand new conversation that has its own nested history. So when I hit the reply button, it'll again bring up that chat entry window. And one of the things we wanted to point out was what they call an @mention. This is used to call attention to a user, a channel, or even a whole team. So by hitting the @ sign and then starting to type in a name, in this case Jim, I can hit enter and it will send Jim an alert saying, TJ just mentioned you in a chat, you should go check that out. And again, it's meant to call attention to particular information. And you can just use users, or if I started typing the name of a team, it would also fill that in for me, or an entire channel. So next you can see the glyph for emojis, and I'm sure everyone by now is familiar with what emojis are. These are one of the features that you can turn on and off in that administrative panel, but it allows you to add a little bit extra flair to your conversation. And next to that, you can see a spot for adding animated GIFs or pre-canned memes that are included with the product. And again, all controllable administratively if you don't want to have this allowed. There are nice ways. We have it open freely on our system. They're good ways to spice things up and keep people using the platform and not make it so drudgy. So unless you want to block that, it's pretty safe to leave running. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about meeting with Microsoft Teams. So this falls into a number of categories. So pre-planned meetings, where just like in Outlook, where you would schedule something for next week at a certain time, what that user experience looks like, some of the features within Teams meetings, and then we'll talk briefly about mobile. So a traditional Outlook meeting, we've all seen these. It's been the platform for email collaboration for 20 plus years. You create a meeting, it's accepted or declined, it'll pop up on your calendar, and you attend it. or not. Well, Teams doesn't upset that apple cart too much. When you have Teams installed, you're going to see a new glyph added to the home screen for new Teams meeting. And if you're already in an existing meeting, you'll also see one that says Teams meeting. And what these allow you to do is transform an existing Outlook meeting or create a new Teams meeting from scratch using the exact same feature set. So as you can see here, this is a new Teams meeting. The location is listed as Microsoft Teams. And then there's an attendee link that's automatically created and added to the email for you. And this is in addition to any other text or other things you want to add to the meeting. You can see the horizontal line there right above the join Microsoft Teams meeting. That's where all of your other text or any other agenda items or things you would include would go. In the example I have here, as we have the audio conferencing add-on, it also inserted a dial-in number and a conference ID. And what this allows you to do is hold a Teams meeting and also provide a phone number for any of the attendees to use instead of using their computer or their mobile phone with the app. So you can ensure that whether it's an external partner or an internal staff member that might not have access to a PC or a Mac or the web at all can still participate in some fashion. And that audio conferencing add-on is available for all existing 365 plans, and it's $4 per user if you want to add that in. Something to note with that as well, you don't have to add that to all users in your organization. If you have a small subset of staff that need to collaborate with that option, you can just add it to their accounts, and that way any meetings they create will have it, and the other staff will not. You could also use it if you have a meeting room or a conference room with a dedicated PC. You could put the audio conferencing just on that account so that the meetings that are held in that room have the phone part added to them, whereas other staff do not. So you don't have to necessarily license it globally. So we talked about Outlook. Well, you can also schedule directly from Microsoft Teams. That calendar menu item that I mentioned earlier will actually pull your normal Outlook calendar or your Office 365 calendar, showing all the details that are in there and all the meetings that you have scheduled. And right from that interface, you can create a new meeting just like you would in Outlook. And they look very much the same. The only additional feature is about midway down where it says Customer Training Development, Microsoft Teams. And what you can do when you create the meeting from Teams is say, I want to hold this meeting in a specific team or a specific channel. And that will collect the data that's shared in that meeting into that channel. A good example of that is if you're having a meeting like we are, or like we do every week on Tuesday, if there's ongoing chat or files that are shared or anything like that, those will show up in a channel if we have the meeting in one. If we just have a regular meeting that's not dedicated to one of those locations, that data is effectively lost. So if you have recurring meetings that are related to, say, the accounting department, it'd be a good idea to hold the meeting within their team or within a specific channel so that you can have that continual data collection going on. So joining a Teams meeting, what does it look like? Well, if you open up the appointment in Outlook, it looks really no different than a standard Outlook meeting, except it has that Join Microsoft Teams link built in. All you have to do is click on that, and it will either open up in Teams or open up on the web and let you join that meeting. In this example, the audio conferencing add-on was not installed for that user, so the phone number information is not present. So looking at a meeting appointment in the middle panel there from Teams, it's the same way. You'll have a join button, or you could also click the link at the bottom to access it that way. And lastly, we have an example of a cell phone. So in this case, this is what it looks like from the Outlook app on Android, where you just have the join button. And in this example, it would either open up the browser or open up the Teams application and join the meeting. So what you would see next, depending on your computer, is either a screen to say, hey, we haven't detected Teams. Do you want to download that now? In this example, it's the Windows version, but if you were on a Mac, it would have the same link for the Mac platform. You can join on the web instead, which is that link on the right. Or if Teams just wasn't running, you can click that link at the bottom that says launch it now. And that will then bring up the Teams app and give it the details for your meeting so that you can join. And then you'll be presented with the actual activation of that meeting. So in this example, you have one more step. So there's that join now button in purple there. And then you have video, the video distortion option, so either blur or custom backgrounds, to start with your microphone on or off. And then lastly, the devices that you want to use. So if you maybe don't have your headset plugged in yet or anything like that, you can use this moment before you join the meeting to get yourself squared away before you actually go in. And it's good to know all of these options can be adjusted during the meeting. So you can start with everything off, get into the meeting, and then activate your microphone, activate your camera, and things like that afterwards. So while you're in the meeting, there's a number of controls that you'll see on a bar, basically every time you move your mouse. It's kind of in the bottom middle of the screen. And from here, you can toggle that video or audio back on or off. You have the sharing button. There's the more actions, which we'll get to in just a second, and then the chat and the participants windows. So that more actions button, when you click on that, this is where Microsoft's put all of the items that are extras. So I mentioned you can change the device settings after the meeting starts, which would be the very top one. And then you can also start a recording. You can turn off incoming video, which is very handy if you're presenting. Sometimes the video coming in from other members of the meeting might be distracting. By selecting that, it will turn off all of their video feeds coming to you. It doesn't impact everyone else, but it just makes it so you have a distraction-free environment. The two above that, turn on live captions. That's currently in preview. Using Cortana's artificial intelligence, it will translate the speech that it detects into words on the screen. So it's live closed captioning. We've used it a bunch. When it's on, it's really on, and when it's off, it's hilarious. So if you want to just watch muted, it's really fun to do too. The next feature right above that, start video with blur, that's actually out of date. Microsoft just started publishing a new feature that allows customized backgrounds to give it parity with some of the other video software that's out there. And they have a selection of about 25 customized backgrounds to erase what is behind you in the picture with something customized. So that's a feature that actually was announced as live on Thursday last week and is starting to actually hit tenancies today. I know of our tenancy, Aberdean, as well as one of our customers for sure had it because we were trying it out in our 8 a.m. meeting this morning. So you can see there's an example of what it looks like in a meeting. What I want to look at next are the two other tabs. And this first one is the meeting chat. So this is the great feature. So if you're in a meeting and you're not the presenter, you're not talking, this allows you to communicate with everyone in the meeting silently without disturbing the overall meeting itself. And as you can see on the bottom, all the normal chat glyphs and options are there, including attachments. So when I mentioned holding a meeting in a channel, this information could then be saved and would be published in that channel so it wouldn't be lost. Next, we're going to look at the Participants tab. So by selecting that, you'll see all the people currently in the meeting. And this is great if you're, just taking attendance, not as a teacher would be, but just knowing who's in the meeting and who's present, and then being able to either mute people or, if necessary, kick someone out of a meeting if it was one that you organized. This is also a great way if someone's missing from a meeting, whether it's one you just did as an ad hoc meeting or one that was scheduled, you can just go ahead and type in their name or even phone number if you have that plan, and it will call them or call them through Teams to get them to join in to the meeting. We've used that a number of times here in the last few weeks as we've been doing prep, where we'll be having a meeting with one or two people and say, oh, let's bring this person in. You type their name in, tell Teams to give them a call, and it will then link them up to the meeting that you're having. So next we're going to talk about sharing content within a meeting. That's that middle button there with the little down arrow. So by selecting the share button, it'll show you all the content that's present on your computer that's capable of being shared. So in this example, that first column is sharing the actual display itself. So in this example, there's two screens. So it's screen 1 and screen 2. And that will share whatever data you put on there, whether it's your mouse moving around or an application you drag into it or a web browser. Whatever you put on that physical monitor will be shared out to the meeting. The next column are all the different windows you have open. So in this example, windows are any applications you have. So the Teams application is a window. Your web browser would be a window. PowerPoint would be a window. And you can select those. And what that does is contain the sharing only to that application. If you close that application, sharing ends. If you minimize that, it just stays on the screen. So you don't risk exposing anything that will be on your desktop or in another application while you're sharing. So the next grid of 4 there are actual, in this case, PowerPoint examples that are already present in the channel in the team that we're meeting in. So what you can do with that is say, I'm showing this PowerPoint and it will display it to the team, but they'll also have the ability to open that up separately and browse through it because that content is already part of the channel you're in. It's a really nice feature, especially when you're collaborating, and it allows people to skip ahead or move backwards to catch up on something if they want to when you're in that more collaborative environment versus like we are today where someone is speaking to points on a slide and moving on at their pace. And then lastly, that final column where you see whiteboard and then another kind of pink in there, those are third-party applications or Microsoft applications that have been integrated into Teams. There are over 3,000 integrations available currently, and some of them work within the sharing, some of them don't. It just depends on what feature that you're using. In this case, the top one there is the Microsoft Whiteboard, which is a collaborative digital whiteboard that you can share. It happens to be integrated with Teams and is presented as an option if I wanted to use it. So lastly, in this section, we're going to talk a little bit about mobility. The Teams application is extremely robust across all platforms. Microsoft calls it, not only is it feature complete as a production tool, but it's platform ubiquitous, which means that all the features available on the Windows PC version are available on the Mac OS version, which are available on the web browser version, and are also available on the iOS or Android version. At this point, I have not been able to disprove that. I've used it on every one of those platforms, and the app has every feature you can think of. Whether it's joining a meeting, presenting content, or other things, they all work together. The example here being mobile, whether you're on an iPhone or an Android phone or an iPad or an Android tablet, you could still fully participate in the meeting. And as you can see in the examples there in the bottom right, they're watching a PowerPoint presentation, but still getting full audio and video during that as well. So no matter where you're at, you can still participate in a meeting. So next we're going to talk about file collaboration. So you can think of Teams as your data access portal. So each team or each channel in a team has native storage built into it. That's that Files tab that's required. It's part of that. You can also connect it to any other existing cloud storage that you use, whether that's OneDrive or SharePoint, or even Box or Dropbox or Citrix. Those options are available as well. They're not as tightly integrated as the native OneDrive option and the native SharePoint options, but they are available. They are also things you can turn administratively off. So if you don't want someone to be able to add a link to Dropbox, you can turn that off and deny it. This also then allows you to share and sync using the OneDrive and SharePoint tools you may already be familiar with. Because at the back end or behind every team is a fully fleshed out SharePoint experience that controls the data. So what does that actually look like? Well, working with files, in this example, we have the Microsoft Training team and the General tab. So we're looking at files, and you can see the listing of some folders and a PowerPoint. And if we click the link in the right side that says Open in SharePoint, you can see it looks exactly the same. There's a document library with a general folder that contains the exact same data. So adding files is exactly what you'd expect it to be. There's options to click a button and say, I want to upload a specific file. And you can then select a file from your computer. It will upload and be present. You can also simply drag and drop. So if you have a file on your desktop that you want to add to a team or add to a post or add to a chat, drag it over there, it will upload and be instantly available. So as an example of doing it in chats, you can see the little paperclip icon, which is now the universal symbol for attachments. In this example, that then shows in the Files tab of that communication. So as I talked about briefly earlier, each individual chat you might have, whether in this case it's Jim and I or with multiple people, they all have their own conversation history and they all have their own dedicated file history. And these are available to you at any time, so you can go back and reference them. But they're all contained within that private area. So I mentioned before that the back end of the Teams experience is SharePoint. Well, that allows you to connect directly with OneDrive. So if you have a team you're a member of and you want to synchronize that data to your computer for easy access, you have that option. So in this example, you can see hit the Open in SharePoint link, followed by in the purple box there where you can hit sync, and then that will start the normal synchronization process. It will say, hey, did you mean to open up Microsoft OneDrive? And you say, yes, of course I did. It will open up OneDrive, connect your system to that particular team site, and start synchronizing that data. All the features that are present in OneDrive normally are present when it's connected to a team. So to kind of wrap things up, we're going to talk a little bit about the administration piece. There is a dedicated Teams Administration Center. It's the link in the slide here, admin.teams.microsoft. It requires a global administrator account or the Teams service administrator role. So if you do want to give someone the overall ownership or mastery of the Teams experience for your company, you can give them that without giving them other administrative roles in Office 365. Some notes about the settings you're going to see. Things termed as settings are global, and they're almost always an on or off type of scenario. They're things that you set and make a choice for everyone in your organization that you're going to allow or disallow. Policies, on the other hand, are granular. You can apply those to users or teams specifically and have multiple versions of them. So a good example of that is the ability to use like the memes or the emojis or the animated GIFs. Maybe you don't want a certain group of staff or a certain team to be able to use those, but other team or maybe team owners are allowed to use those. You can create different policies that apply to the owners of specific teams or maybe the management staff, and then have a different policy that applies to the rank and file workers that are not managers or team owners. And then make that what controls who can do what in your environment. And a good example of an organizational setting is one that's very prominent is guest access. So as I mentioned, guest access is controlled administratively. And you can, right off the bat, are guests allowed at all in your collaboration experience? If you do not want any of your team's experience to ever be used externally, you can turn that off and it will not be presented to your staff at all. If you do leave it on, which is the default, you can then control what features are allowed to guests. And that's things like accessing screen sharing or the meeting features. So you can say, well, guests are allowed to attend, but they're not allowed to share content or they're not allowed to upload data or any of the other features that you want to turn off. And then you can also tune access to the messaging features. So being able to edit or delete messages, which you may want to toggle off for everyone no matter what, or the use, again, of things like memes or the GIFs or things like that. So maybe you want guests to only be able to post text and that's it. You can lock that experience down to ensure that people coming into your organization from outside have a very, very strict set of rules they must follow. That brings us to the end of today's video. We hope you found the information useful, and we look forward to sharing more about Microsoft 365 in the future. For more information about our services and Microsoft Teams, please visit our website at aberdean.com. That's ABERDEAN.com.